Hello, good morning. Just got past some technical difficulties to get everything working properly. I kind of freaked out. My account seemed like it had vanished. I had to get back into it. Um, so anyway, this is going to be NDE's part three. And last time on part two, I introduced some topics that I hadn't covered in the very first introductory one. This one, for those that are still along for the ride, is going to get really trippy. I've been kind of categorizing what I'm covering in terms of what I consider to be plausibility and what people might be familiar with. The first one was very basic, and a lot of people might have heard of the certain things that happen on the typical NDE, like a life review and seeing family and beings on the other side and this sort of thing. Then the second one got a little more involved. I won't try to rehash that. This third one, I'm going to really get into some trippy subjects and explain it in terms of how I've found it believable and all of this based on the total body of information that is out there. Uh, Now there are just literally hundreds, probably thousands of NDE stories on YouTube. They can be found in other sources as well. There have been a certain amount of things on Netflix and televised. There's plenty of books out there. So this is not the kind of phenomenon anymore where people are afraid to speak out. In the old days, people were afraid to speak out because people thought they were crazy and would drug them or send them to loony bins or whatever because they just are talking crazy talk. Now, in view of all the stories that are out there, the believability factor has gone way up because there's just hundreds and hundreds of people that have testified to what they've gone through. I listened to one this morning that was super trippy. A guy that had been on a mountaineering experience up in Maine, doing ice and rock climbing and extreme conditions, which I can kind of relate to. Just I got a little bit into rock climbing and things of that sort, and I love mountaineering and all that. But this guy had basically died of hypothermia on a climb and way too late in the day, and the temperature dropped, and he and a buddy of his got trapped up on a ledge, and the rope jammed in a crevice, and he couldn't get down, and basically was just hanging there and passed on and went to the other side and relayed the story in such detail. It was riveting. Um, Again, very consistent with some of these other stories. So anyway, I'm going to jump in here. Disclaimer is that this is going to get really trippy. This is NDE's part three. Eventually, I may do a part four when I've been able to assimilate even more trippy material. But again, I believe this is true. I don't find it to be any less believable in the world we live in, which is pretty damn crazy. This gives it a large context, just based on what we know from being on the earth and taking a kind of materialistic scientific view. We've gone through most of human history, most of us believing in this is what there is, what we see is what is, what we can prove is what is, which all seems completely logical until one starts to see evidence that there is another side and that ultimately this is a material manifestation here. Our bodies, the planet, the things that we can touch and feel and see. But there's an entirely different spiritual dimension that is basically comprised of energy. So that's one of the premises of what this is all about. So that's some of the subjects I'm going to hit on today. Reincarnation plays a huge role, and I used to reject this. So, I mean, if you find this to be a little bit out there, that's fine. I get it. I would not have considered this would be a realistic possibility a few years ago, but in the context of what other people have experienced being on the other side, coming back, seeing past relatives, family members and angels and Jesus and everything, people have come back and all communication on the other side is telepathic, and what they see, I mean, there's no confusion, no language barrier, and there's what they refer to often as information downloads. And basically all the information, I mean, the God that people are experiencing on the other side shares with us all of his knowledge, and he's shown people, other worlds and and vast amounts of information. So the reincarnation thing is kind of where I want to start. And I've always felt like, we go through this earthly life and we go through all these experiences and we learn things. And I always felt like, man, it'd be kind of too bad if we leave this life and everything we ever learned and applied ourselves to just disappears and there's nothing more coming of it. And another thing that I always found a little bit interesting is child prodigies, people that have fantastic talent, 2 and 3 and 4 year old kids that can just pick up a guitar and play like they've played for their whole life. And even my own son uh, has very considerable musical ability, like really terrific for his age. And I'm like, that's pretty neat. I mean, I tried to learn to play guitar and music, and I don't have uh, anything compared to what he's got. Like, where did it come from? Well, maybe he's just born with that. It's genetic. Da, da, da. Maybe. But there are cases where a kid couldn't possibly assimilate the amount of material that you see coming out of them at a young age. So, I find it plausible that these people may not have, they may have been around before and learned some of this and they're carrying it forward. So anyway, the context of the reincarnation is the idea that we are basically learning and growing and I feel like I'm trying to explain something that's really hard to explain, but the whole idea is a lot of these people come back and consider the Earth to be a learning planet. In fact, it's considered one of the toughest ones. The universe is huge. There's other universes, other planets, other beings, and a lot of these things are alluded to in the Bible. Like Jesus talked about other sheep not of this fold, and it's very believable to me now that people that have gone over to the other side have met other beings, met other people, met angels, met spirit guides, all of which seem like, part of my issue with this too was that in the big box churches that I was in, for whatever reason, the Western mindset rejects a lot of what Eastern religions take for granted, like all of these kind of concepts of reincarnation and such things as that. In America, I haven't traveled that much or been exposed to a lot of other religions other than by studying some of them. But a lot of the churches consider it to be scary, new agey stuff that would get you thrown in hell if you delved into it. Past lives and all these kinds of things seem crazy. But now that I've been exposed to more of this material, it makes as much sense as just this life on Earth. The idea that you're born once, you die, and then it's over, finished. You just disappear into the ether. There's nothing more to it. Well, these people say no, it isn't so. In fact, there is no death. People come here, they learn, and there's a lot to this life. One of the trippy things about the reincarnation is that a lot of these people will assert that they've met guides, guardian angels, and this life, in many cases, has been planned in advance. People will meet with a council of elders or whatever with their guides and plan the life out that they're going to have next. So this is sort of like that's home base. Being on the other side is home. This is an excursion. This is the away team, the away planet, the way I see it, referring to Star Trek a little bit. So we have choices. We have free will. This is a free will planet. That is one reason things are so crazy here. And what's going on here is we don't remember. Part of the condition of coming back is that your memory is pretty much wiped so that it won't ruin this experience. If you knew what I'm learning now, it could damage or ruin your experience, because if you knew this was somehow staged or planned, it would remove the reality of it. So we're here basically to learn and experience things. Another concept is the connectedness, that we're all connected, and that God or the creator or the source, as some refer, we're all connected. We're all one, essentially. And the reality is that all is one. We're all connected, and even plants, trees, animals, everything. We're all interconnected. And God isn't some separate entity looking down on us from above with a magnifying glass, judging and expecting perfection out of us. That's nothing to do with it. A lot of religious teachings have been utterly debunked in terms of this, kind of Old Testament God that is fault finding and wants to make us perfect ourselves in order to qualify to go to heaven. All this, none of that it fits in with the context of this reality. The idea here is we're eternal beings. We basically always have been, in a sense. We were created, we're part of the larger whole, and we're not isolated. We have our own individual identities and personalities. We don't lose that, which I'm glad of. I didn't like the idea of dying and disappearing into the void and just being non existent, because what would be the point of that? So each of us individually learns, but there's a lot of amazing principles. Like the whole idea, a lot of people go through a life review after they pass and see themselves they relive their life, and they get to experience it as all the people they interacted with, whether good for good or bad. So, I mean, if you are a cruel, hurtful person, you will be your own victim. So, in a sense, the golden rule is enforced in a very bizarre way. There's no time on the other side. Past, present, and future are all basically one and instantly accessible, uh, because there is no time. Time is a construct that we have here based on the rotation of planets around the stars, and every planet has different length days. I mean, time is very relative. We use clocks and things to measure time just so we can pace ourselves. That's an earthly concept. On the other side, I mean, even the Bible says 1,000 years is a single day, and it's the absolute truth, because people pass over. They could be dead on a table in a hospital for 10 minutes and have gone through what seemed like 100 years worth of experiences, and they come back and they're utterly transformed because they've gone through something that was so transformative and seemed like it took a lot longer. And now they come back and they're like, it takes a while to adjust to reality on this side. So the life planning element is an important concept, because we're not just being recycled through reincarnation, but the idea is we're actually having plans made, and we having things we need to learn. So we're coming here for a purpose. And one of the more, I want to say, controversial, I know some people have trouble buying into this. It seems so bizarre. But one concept that comes up is this thing called dualism or duality. And it's simply the contrast, like when you take a given subject and split it into uh, contrasting and opposing elements, like black and white, male, female, good, bad, all of these sort of things. It's dualism. And one of the life lessons we learn, and the whole idea, I mean, an underlying, probably the biggest concept to take away from any of this is simply that uh, the creative force or God or source or whatever is love. And love is the most powerful force out there. It's a constructive, accepting, non-condemning force. And when people go over there, the first thing they usually encounter is unbelievable and indescribable feeling of love and peace and acceptance. So instead of this judgmental, harsh expectation that we on earth tend to fear, people go over there and they say they're so blown away by the love. It can't be described. The beauty, the music, the sights there are so amazing that they're beyond human description. The colors, there are colors that can't be described. There's no way to. And when we're out of the body, you can see 360 degrees around you. You can pass through things. You experience things on a different level. The body actually is a very limiting entity. We're living in a body that we can perceive a limited amount of the light spectrum, hear a limited amount of the sound spectrum. We can function. We have that ability here, but we're limited by the body. We get it. On the other side, you can travel instantly to anywhere. Thoughts become things. They're very powerful. You can think of a place and be there instantaneously. So we're not on the other side limited by this human body. So, it's a vehicle we're in while we're here, and we learn lessons here. So on the subject of the dualism, one thing I find really kind of interesting is, for whatever reason, certain things have to be learned the hard way. And the Earth is a tough planet. In fact, some people have said they were told it was basically the hardest planet, or one of the hardest learning places there is, because there's so much darkness here. And all you've got to do is watch the news for a half an hour, and it's obvious this is a tough place to live. And especially for a lot of people, I consider myself very fortunate and somewhat privileged, having grown up in a normal American middle-class family, and uh, haven't had to go through a lot of the terrible stuff that people go through in other countries. I don't know how they endure it. I'm not that tough. A lot of people have gone through much worse stuff than I ever have. Um, so the dualism, I am interpreting this based on a bunch of NDE stories that I've listened to, but uh, for us to learn compassion, I realize like if you float through life and you're just coasting on a wave and you have no problems and no health problems, no money problems, you don't have to suffer, then it's going to be very hard for you to have compassion for people that are not in that situation. And you can kind of see it. I mean, people that have never been poor. I mean, there's greed versus poverty. There's all these dualistic concepts. And part of our experience to really learn to love completely and have compassion, it's sometimes necessary to suffer. So I kind of see a lot of the suffering we go through as, unfortunately, the price that has to be paid to develop compassion and love. Um, the love is very accepting and very, the idea of going to any length to save people. I mean, this God doesn't want to lose anybody. So he'll go to the ends of the earth to save people from, you know, out of the void or darkness or misery or whatever. So a lot of the concepts that are a little hard to handle, I think make sense in the context of if you've never, like if you've always had a ton of money, there are people who go through life and they just are born into wealth and never had to work or never really had to struggle to make ends meet. They're not going to have that much compassion on people that are really fighting for it and struggling. So I think, in the dualistic sense, if you've been really poor, the poor are the most generous people in terms of the amount of money that they have, the percentage they'll give away. Rich people might give a little bit. They tend to be stingier than poor people. Same thing, medical problems, physical suffering. If you've never suffered physically, it's very hard to read that suffers physically. And I mean, in fact, today is my 65th birthday, and I've been going through some medical issues lately. And a couple of months ago, I felt the best I have in 20 years. I felt terrific. I mean, I love being outdoors and hiking, doing all kinds of athletic things. And then all of a sudden, I started to have some medical issues. And man, when you're at the mercy of doctors and you're just sitting there being acted upon and suffering pain and the anxiety that comes with anticipating potential surgery and all these things. It's very unsettling and scary. And instantly I'm like, holy crap, I think I get it now to a point because I watched my mom pass away a few years ago and she was, 91 and had reached a point where her body was utterly shot. Her mind was still sharp as a whip. And she was fully aware of what she was going through. And it was bizarre. And then back in '08, my dad had cancer and he passed away very graciously. He accepted his situation and never complained. And it was a very different experience. But now I'm looking back, I'm like, man, what strength of character he had to lay there in a bed knowing he was, he knew 10 years before then when they told him his cancer had spread out in his body and he only had 10 years. And he adopted an attitude to do everything he could while he could. And on my birthday, back in '08, we skied the Black Diamond Trails at Jiminy Peak. It was like the last, and I didn't know. This was January 31st, and by April 4th, he was gone. So he put out everything he had in him. And he said, yeah, he liked bicycling around the neighborhood where he lived. So, and he was almost 80. He had his 80th birthday. And he said, yeah, when I go out for a walk or a bike ride, when I go for a walk up the hill, I know that when I turn around, that's the last step I can take and still make it home. He was just knowing. I'm like, holy crap. So, he had that grace on him to take it in stride and be courageous. And then, right before he died, he was even telling me things that I couldn't interpret at the time. He said, well, I'm getting ready to take my toys and go home. And he was laying in his deathbed basically and knowing that he was never going to get out of it again at the very end. And he said, yeah, I'm ready to take my toys and go home. And I'm looking at him like, holy crap. And I said, well, what are your toys? And he said, oh, my relationships and my memories. And it stuck in my head, but I did not understand the context. Well, now it all makes sense. A lot of these bizarre concepts fall into place for me and they make sense now. So that's one of them. So check my notes. I've got a few more topics I want to touch on. So we've talked about yeah, the dualism and the compassion. So there's various things that I think enter in. Like we come in when we come down to the earth, or whatever our say next life plan might be, and there's other places people can go, other experiences they can have. Um, there's a plan made, and sometimes we consider it a mission. Like, what am I going here to learn? Uh, you might have certain lessons in life that you need to learn. So you might, if you lack compassion, you might come here and have to suffer a bit. Or if you don't understand what it's like to be in poverty and you want to have more compassion for people in poverty, you might come down here and live, an impoverished, very difficult life financially. So we all come down with different emphases, different plans. And one of the things that's very key in this whole thing is not to judge others. I never quite understood the context of that so much, but now I do. It's like judging others. It's like you don't know why they're here or what they're doing, what they're going through. And so it's important to love others and support them and accept the fact we're all here for different reasons. We're all in different places. There's going to be rich people, poor people, healthy people, not so healthy people, beautiful people, people not so much. Um, so there's all kinds of things going on here simultaneously. And to not judge others, part of the reason isn't just to be a nice person, but we don't know what the other guy's here for or what he's going to have to go through. So that's an important concept. Um, there's something else I was just about to touch on and it slipped away from me. See if I can find it. It will come back. I'm going to touch on another subject for a second. Hope this one comes back. So there's another idea here that I hear a lot, and it sounds, again, it was one of those things I would have rejected as new agey a few years ago, but a lot of people refer, and when you go over there, it's very context oriented compared to where you came from in life. It's almost like there's an accommodation made so that what you see on the other side is familiar and you can understand it. People will end up in these beautiful cathedral like buildings. Some people will be out in nature and it's absolutely gorgeous. I mean, it depends what you grew up with. Some people will see different figures and interpret them in different ways. Um, but there's one thing that's an interesting concept is there's this library and people go into this big, huge building and this library, there's a library in which they call it the Akashic records. And what it actually amounts to, and this is bizarre and mind blowing, but the idea that all of human history for every single individual has been recorded since the beginning of time, so that there's this record and books of everyone's life from when they were first born or created, every life they've lived, every last detail of it. And all of this information is like the ultimate cloud computing where all this information has been recorded and exists. And even alludes to the idea that all the hairs of your head are numbered. Jesus would say, "Yeah, two sparrows sell for a penny, but God cares more about you than about these sparrows. He knows everything." And I'm like, this is so mind blowing because now as we move into an age where we have cloud computing and we have vast amounts of information stored, I feel like what we're doing is basically constructing a very close parallel to what's on the other side based on the wisdom that we basically have in us and connect to. And our ability now to record and store vast amounts of video information is closing in on being similar to what's on the other side. And even the concept of quantum entanglement is showing the connection between things. I mean, we're slowly gaining knowledge that's moving us in the direction of understanding what's on the other side of the idea that we're all connected, we're all interconnected. On the other side, people report seeing, their pets that they had when they were here. Plants, trees, nature, all these things exist over there. So, it all enters into the fact that all these things are connected. Um, I think at this point I'm on a stop. I may do a part 4 to this series. I just want to introduce some new subjects. I'm recording.
Oh.
Okay, my wife just got up, so I've got to wind down, and I'll touch on some other subjects later. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed this section and gives you a little bit of food for thought. And we will talk again soon. Have a good day.